welcome again. I'm Leanne Ranieri. I'm the Director of Pupil Services. Some of the supervisors are on tonight. I believe all three of our special education supervisors, PJ Dacus in the Henderson feeder pattern, Lisa Pfeiffer in the East feeder pattern, and Melissa Kleiman in the Reston feeder pattern. I want to let you know we have been working feverishly all summer to put programs together, and especially in the ever-changing world that we are in. We were very fortunate to be able to operate a pilot this summer. Many of your children participated in that pilot, and I thank you so much for allowing us to work with your children. It really gave us an opportunity to put some of the health and safety plan pieces in place and be able to try them out and figure out what works and maybe what doesn't work so well. So tonight I'm going to share some of the things that we'll be putting in place for this upcoming school year for the in-person program, that brick and mortar program, and then answer any questions that you have. I will share off the bat that once we go to the hybrid model, students will return to their home school. For the beginning of the school year, in order to be able to have adequate staff, it's really important that we had some classes together in the same building to be able to share some of that staff, to be able to collaborate, to be able to work together. And that, I think, is going to be very helpful. But once we do move to hybrid, all students will go back to their home building. And even though they are in the brick and mortar and maybe aren't attending the building they typically would, their regular education inclusion is all in the building they typically would be attending, so that there will be a smooth transition once we get into that hybrid model. They are still attached to their homerooms. They're still attached for attendance and grades and all those kinds of things to their home building. Certainly they're welcome in the building that they will be attending if it's different. Our administration has been very much advocating for the students. I can tell you that Mr. Brown, I think he's on tonight as well, has been sending me lots of questions for our autistic support program, and making sure that our teachers and our students are very welcome in the building, as long as they're going to need to be. So I just wanted to kind of share that up front. When we look at the buildings that students will be participating in, just kind of a reminder, East Bradford will have our life skills. There'll be 2 classes there. East Goshen is going to have all of the autistic support students there, and so there will be, I think, at least 6 classrooms because many of our students are participating in the brick and mortar. Parents still did have the opportunity to have their children participate remotely and receive their education that way, and so their needs will be addressed as well. At Mary C. House, we will have our elementary emotional support program that will be there. Starkweather will be our multiple disabilities and our life skills program from Westtown Thornberry. At the secondary level, few people have autistic support. There will be 1 class there, but they will be able to collaborate with East, who will also have an autistic support classroom as well. Pierce is having a secondary life skills, so that is both from Pierce and from Henderson. And East, as I shared, will have autistic support. Ruston will have the multiple disabilities and life skills program. I'm sorry, not Ruston, excuse me, Stetson will have the Stetson and Ruston classes will both be at Stetson, and that's the life skills / multiple disabilities program that will be there. When we look at our English language development program, just for your aware, we are putting all of the elementary students at Fern Hill and all of the secondary students at Henderson High School. There is some crossover with some of our services, and so I just wanted to mention that. Students will be logging in with their regular classrooms and their buildings. They will have adult support to be able to do that while they're in the building. The reason we went with the schedule as is so that it matches the remote schedule. So students will have every opportunity to be included with their regular education peers. So students at the elementary level will be receiving instruction 9 to 3. And secondary will be 8:45 to 3:30. and they will be mirroring the schedule that is happening in regular education as much as possible. There might be some tweaks along the way based on the services that the students need to receive, such as related services and things along those lines. For some reason, I'm getting an echo. So hopefully, if you could mute yourself if somebody is on, I'd appreciate that. Okay, when we look into the classroom, okay, I think Amelia, and I apologize if I'm saying you're wrong incorrectly. If you could mute yourself, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. I think that helps. Okay, so we look at the classroom, some of the safety measures that will be put in place. Students will be at desks or even at small tables that will be placed 6 feet apart from one another. So from a social distancing perspective, we can set up the physical space to allow for that social distancing for our students. We won't have more than 14 students in any classroom, and that's probably on the very high end. And again, we need to make sure that we have that 6-foot distance between students. When we look at though with adults and with that social distancing, we know with our students with the significant disabilities that they may have, that social distancing between the adults and the students many times will not be feasible in order to be able to implement the IEPs as they are written. For example, if it's hand-over-hand modeling, depending upon where they are on the prompt hierarchy. If they're working one-to-one with an adult on an assignment or in a verbal behavior classroom where they need to be face-to-face across from one another. It's not going to be feasible to have 6 feet away from the adult to the student. And we understand that, and that is permissible through the regulations when we're dealing with students that have disabilities. When we look at how the classrooms are going to be equipped with safety measures, all classes will have masks, they will have gloves, there will be either hand sanitizer or a sink. And washing hands is preferable to hand sanitizer, but both, one or the other will be available. When we talk about face coverings for students with disabilities, all students are required to be wearing a face covering at all time except when taking a 5-minute break per hour. Now, I know, and we know from the summer pilot, that is not always feasible for our students with disabilities. When we had the pilot, what we did is we encouraged students to wear their face covering. We taught them how to wear it. We allowed them, we reinforced when they were wearing it, and we would extend the time. So, if one day they were wearing it for 15 minutes, we would try to increase that to like 20 minutes the next time, and it gradually increase it. But again, students with disabilities, it may not be feasible for them to wear the face coverings for as long as what a typical child would be able to do, and we understand that. So what are things that we're doing about that? We will look at different kinds of face coverings. So it can be a mask that we will provide as like the surgical types of masks, and then we will have them available for students and for our staff. They can use homemade masks. Although gaiters have been kind of stated that they're not as effective, they are still on the list that are permitted to be worn. There are also face shields, ones that can be worn on the head. We did find some students over the summer that wore them that came with a baseball cap. So if you have your child and that's something they feel comfortable with, certainly they can wear one of those. So any of those face coverings are permitted. For students that are unable to wear a face covering because due to their disability or for medical reasons, we do need some documentation. So if they're unable to wear it at all, then we will need some documentation as to why they're unable to wear a mask or face covering at all. In those situations where students are unable to or are not able to for extended periods of time wear a face coverings, we will be using things such as like plexiglass dividers, or we'll use like things that can cover a desk that will be like almost like a protector that is plastic in nature, kind of trifold, if you will. that can be on a student's desk. We will use partitions between students. We can also maybe distance a student that is unable to wear a mask a little further away from the other students in that situation. But we will work with students based on their individual needs. But the goal is to wear a face covering for as long as a period of time that a student can wear them. We will not be punishing kids for not wearing them, but we will again be encouraging them to wear them. So I think that's really important to share. For the staff, in addition to what I had shared earlier with the face coverings, we will be providing gloves, and in situations where they may be bodily fluids that were being transmitted, there will be disposable gowns that can be used, and this could be during the toileting or feeding, or when students are in close proximity. So it's some extra protections that are available for the staff as well. Let me see, I want to make sure. We will, as far as lunch is concerned, hopefully everyone received the menus that Aramark has provided. If at all possible, we would really appreciate it if you are planning on purchasing lunches or breakfast, please to get that back to us by Thursday, so that Aramark has an opportunity to be able to fulfill those adequately. Students will be eating lunch between 11 and 12. I should mention the breakfasts were $1.25, the lunches were $2.75, and students are welcome to bring in food from home. I would suggest, if at all possible, that you avoid nut products. I don't know of allergies at the moment for the students in the classes, but we can certainly find that out. But at least for the first week, I'd appreciate it if you could avoid that until we can kind of make sure that we don't have students with food allergies in specific classes. The first week with Aramark, they will have some extra sandwiches on hand. So for some reason, if students were unable to get the calendar in, or that you weren't able to provide food, we'll have some extra things that are available. Let me move it a little bit to some of the cleaning things that will be taking place. All the high touch items in the classrooms will be cleaned every evening. It's a spray that is used from a canister that the custodians will be using, and they will go around to all of the areas to make sure that they are disinfected on a nightly basis. In the classrooms will be disinfectant spray that the staff will be able to use for students in between use. So if there are items that students will have to share, then we will make sure between those uses that spray will be utilized. Another way to kind of mitigate some of that is to be creating individual bins for students so that they'll have their own materials for things such as crayons, pencils, some of the manipulatives, things along those lines, and as well as reinforcers, so that they will have their own individual bins. In the summer, in the pilot, some teachers got really creative and were able to actually use like tackle box trays or medicine trays to be able to put reinforcers and things in there to lessen the amount of touching that needed to take place, which I think worked out very well. We will be using, like if students go outside and they are distanced more than at least 6 feet, masks or face coverings do not need to be worn. And we will use the disinfectant on some of the high touch places, such as handlebars going up on the playgrounds and sliding boards, on monkey bars, on swings, things along those lines. And let me check. Lastly, the area I want to touch upon, and then certainly I want to get into the questions that you have, or if, when we look at, are there symptoms of COVID? So one thing that I'm going to ask all parents to do is to take the temperature of your child before they leave the house in the morning. Ask yourself, and there's a form that I can send out, ask yourself, do they have a sore throat? Do they have shortness of breath? Are they coughing? Things along those lines. If they have a fever or any of those symptoms, please keep them home. You can call into the nurse and talk to her about those symptoms and next steps. We will be taking the temperatures of students in the classroom. So we consider, when we look at vulnerable populations, the students that will be coming into the brick and mortar for our special education services, we feel are considered to be a vulnerable population. So we will be having the temperatures taken for our students in the classroom when they enter, or when they're coming off the bus. We're working that detail out. Or if you're providing transportation in that parent drop-off line. So either in the classroom or in that drop-off, we will be taking the temperatures. If a student has a fever, they will be taken to a nurse. That all the buildings will have a nurse in them, and then the nurse will do more of an assessment. If there is a suspicion of COVID, there is a form that we need to submit to the Chester County Health Department, and we will be submitting those forms, and then obviously contacting you as far as next steps and what to take. We've detailed that out pretty much in our health and safety plan that was submitted to the Department of Education at the beginning of the month. But most of the time, what we do is a very individualized situation. There's actually a kind of decision tree that has to be taken into consideration that the health department and our nurses will be going through to determine what the next steps are. If there is a positive COVID, certainly parents will be notified, as well as what the next steps are in that situation. I'm very thankful to say that in the pilot program over the summer, we did not have any of those incidents. We did have several of the staff members need to be tested, but no one was found to have COVID. So we're very fortunate in that situation. We do understand at some point, somewhere down the line, that we might encounter that, but I think if we take the precautions we have been and the safety measures that we're putting into place, we're keeping students and staff as safe as we possibly can. So I think at this point, I've just talked for the last 15 minutes or so. I'm going to go to the chat. I'm going to start looking there. If you have a question and then I haven't answered, please put that in there, and then I will, call on you, or at least answer the question that is posed. So let me look. So the first question was, will children be able to wear face shields instead of masks? Yes, they can. So anything that's covering, we want it to be covering the mouth and the nose area, but a face shield is certainly permissible. There is a question in regards to transportation, and will high school and middle school students be on the same bus? Probably, that will occur. You should have received your transportation notification. It is certainly, we do this for our regular transportation, where we do provide transportation with different levels. There will be a paraprofessional or an aide on each of the buses to support the students in getting on the bus, if they needed to be in any kind of seat belt or any kind of like star seat, anything along those lines. We are asking that parents do not get on the bus to do that, again, trying for safety measures. And because of that, we are putting a paraprofessional or an aide on each of the buses to be able to help to support the students for entering the bus, exiting, as well as anything that goes on during the bus time. Let me go back up here. Okay, will plexiglass dividers be in place in addition to masks or instead of? They will be more instead of. We don't have a one-to-one for every student that there is plexiglass or a divider. They would be probably in lieu of, but they certainly can be used in addition to, if needed, if a student needs to take that face covering off. Will teachers be teaching in the brick and mortar as well as virtual? Some may need to do that. We do have some students that may be in a life skills program that are in brick and mortar, and some have chosen to stay in the remote setting. Some of those students that are in the remote may be Zooming in to receive some of the instruction along with the students that are in the classroom. And there may be other times that teachers that are in the brick and mortar will have to Zoom with those students that are in the remote setting. It's not all or nothing in that division. They're working out those schedules. If a student is, there's a question from parent at East. If your child is in the autistic support program at East, currently they will attend East for that program. Car line information, easiest time for drop off. That is a really good question. The students do not start until 9 o'clock. Let me get some clarification. I would say that they should not be dropped off any earlier than about 8:45 for the elementary and 8:30 for the secondary. That's about 15 minutes prior to the day beginning. Okay, but that is an excellent question that I want to make sure that we will confirm for that. But I think 15 minutes prior to the program should offer enough opportunity to get the students out of the cars into their classrooms and be ready for instruction at the beginning of that time, either 8:45 or at 9 o'clock. Yeah, will students still be going to their electives? Yeah, so whatever is on their schedule, they will be able to participate in. If that will probably be done remotely for those electives, if those electives are in the regular school building. But that's why at the elementary level, there's times allotted for their specials. At the secondary level, it's a block schedule. Periods 1 to 4 on one day and periods 5 to 8 on the second day, and then they would participate with the regular education class for that. How we're handling of specials? Will kids get their art? Yes, the specials they will be getting at the elementary level, but they will be zooming in to receive that with their homeroom class at that time that they would be getting it. Will teacher services providers be in the building with students, or will they be remote? That's a good question. So if they get related services, speech, OT, PT, they will be receiving those special education services in the brick and mortar setting. Will we get a supply list? If I would say, like, the first week of school, you know, if you participated in the pilot, we used that first week of school to be able to acclimate students back into the school setting, did some, you know, getting some classroom management up, teaching about the social distancing and the face coverings, things along those lines. We're also going to be doing baseline assessments the first 2 weeks of school. If you recall, we are responsible for looking to determine if students are going to be owed compensatory services. And in order to do that, we need to take some baseline assessments on their goals the first 2 weeks. We'll provide instruction for 6 weeks on those goal areas. We'll reassess students at the end of that, and then we'll hold IEP meetings for students that may need compensatory services and how we would be providing them. So those services will be taking place, the baseline, those first 2 weeks. And so therefore there's some flexibility in the schedule. So if there are supplies that are needed, certainly you don't need to worry about having them for the first day of school. But to my knowledge right now, I've not heard from teachers they're expecting students to show up with a list of supplies. We will be trying to supply things such as I said, like markers, pencils, paper, those, you know, things that are essential that they will need for their instruction. Yes, if the temperature is taken at the car line and a child has a fever, they should not be entering the building. If there is a positive COVID, will the building be shut down? Now, as I shared at the beginning, we have not experienced that. Our understanding is that it takes 2 cases of COVID that are unrelated for a shutdown, or actually, I apologize, to be considered an outbreak in a building. We have been informed that if a child is positive in a classroom, we may be able to just close that classroom. That contact tracing will be really important to make a determination if it would need to go beyond the classroom or if it would be needed to be the entire school. If there are 2 students in, like, 1 in each classroom, that is considered an outbreak, and we would close the building for a period of time determined by the Chester County Health Department who would inform us how long that it would have to be closed. Hopefully we don't get to that point, but if there is a positive or there is a suspicion and you need to be notified because of contact tracing, that will definitely take place. How and where will these kids be attending their typical classes? They will be participating via Zoom, and they will be doing that from the brick and mortar setting with adult support to be able to access that. Do we need paperwork that needs to be picked up tomorrow or Thursday at Fernhill? No, there's no paperwork that you need, to my knowledge, that you need to pick up. Now you may be contacted about getting a device or materials from a building. Each of the buildings is handling that a little bit differently. They don't have the same date or time. So there may be some things that you need to be picked up, but you will be notified by the building for that date and time for that specific building. Okay, I've not received busing information, and so who's a good person to contact? Excellent question. Michelle Porco, and it'd be MPORCO@WCASD.net. I don't have her extension off the top of my head. You can also call in to the main line in our district at 484-266-1000, and you can call and ask to have be transferred to the transportation department. So you could either email Michelle Porco, or you could call in, and I would suggest you do that tomorrow to see what might have occurred, why you didn't get that notification, but you definitely should have.
She's extension 1045.
Thank you, Melissa. 1045. That will get you right to Michelle when you call. Will the students be virtually learning with regular teachers who are teaching the virtual classes? If so, will only students with the same virtual teacher be in the same room? Okay, so those are excellent questions. You know, I'm going to use the example of elementary life skills. So they're coming. They would all be attached to, well, that's not a good example. Let me pick another one. Let's go to elementary autistic support. Since they're coming from Fernhill, East Goshen, and Exton, they're all going to be at East Goshen. There is no way to separate them by building. They're working by probably grade levels and by teachers and numbers of separating them, but there will be students from potentially students from multiple buildings in the same classroom. So they will be accessing those Zoom classes individually or in small groups if there so happens that they be in the same class for that. Okay, so they would be, but they are accessing their regular education teachers remotely, but while in the brick and mortar. Okay, so students at the secondary level will be following a block schedule. Now, as I say that, it might be slightly modified because those blocks are 80 minutes long. I want to give some latitude to our secondary special education teachers as to how they're going to divide that time and the supports that will be provided. But they will be following the time schedules for those block periods. They may be doing some other things within those blocks to meet the IEP needs. Okay, you do not need to provide any kind of wipes, masks, and so forth. And I will share with you from working with our custodial staff who have been doing a phenomenal job, cleaning and disinfecting our buildings. We have to be very careful about the products that we're utilizing, because if they're like ammonia-based versus like a bleach-based, it could be toxic if we're mixing chemicals. So at this point, we are only using the products that are being provided by our facilities department, who have been vetting this and monitoring the guidelines throughout the pandemic. Mentioned 14 students, what's the total number plus staff? Okay, so the total number in a classroom is 25. Okay, so with our staff, we want to make sure, that, including the students and the staff, that we would never go over 25. For students that participated in the pilot, I'd be surprised if there was more than 12 total that participated in any of those classrooms between the number of the students and the number of adults that were available. Once we know exactly where the students are, and we could certainly, get more information back out as far as the number of students and staff that are there. But by our current guidelines, we can't have more than 25 in one location. And again, we need to maintain at least the ability to maintain 6 feet distance apart. Okay. Will we communicate if there's a positive COVID case? Yes, we will take the direction from the Chester County Health Department, and that will be however they asked us to communicate, for that particular classroom if we need to shut down, as well as what we can communicate to the entire to the entire building. Okay, we are not notified the specifics. I can share with you when there might be someone that had like a staff person that might have had a family member that was COVID positive over the summer. We were just informed as to what that staff person was going to be out for 14 days or 10 days or whatever the case may be. So we need to protect the rights up under HIPAA and FERPA for both our staff and our students, while being able to provide as much information as possible to our families. So I share that, but the Chester County Health Department does conduct the contact tracing piece of it. And I also should probably mention that anytime staff members are entering any of the rooms within a school building, they need to sign in so that we know who has been in that space if there is someone that is identified as COVID positive. Oh, thank you for your positive thoughts. I appreciate that. What will the caseload for PT, OT, and speech look like? How many buildings will they be bouncing between? For the most part, and this is not pure, because what we did try to do as much as possible is give staff the same choice that we offered our families, that if they felt comfortable working in the brick and mortar, we would accommodate that. If they did not feel comfortable working in the brick and mortar, they were working remote. So it may not be the same provider for the related services that your child typically would have in the building, but for the most part, I believe that most of our speech therapists are working very similar or exactly the population. So they will be providing some of the services for the brick and mortar, as well as for some of the students for remote. But it is possible that you may have a different provider for occupational and physical therapy. And you will be notified about who those providers are next week when the schedules are, once they are set. Okay, I don't know exactly how many buildings that they will be going into, but again, we tried to keep them with their current caseload as much as possible. Someone's asking if their child's starting remote, can they move to brick and mortar? Yes. What I would say though, if you're making that decision, it may take a little while to get the transportation set up. And then we'd also need to make sure that we have adequate space in the class that their child needs to enter. That's really important. And what we've been doing for all of the students is making sure how the IEP needs will be met in that setting. So there could be a delay in the time frame in making that transition. That's also true of if for some reason, as we get into the brick and mortar, that parents decide they want to move to the remote, it's possible, but it will definitely take some time. If you could, thank you. It's been a very delicate balance that the supervisors have been working diligently on to be able to meet the needs of students in the brick and mortar, the remote, and the cyber program. We were not able to add a lot of staff when we moved into that cyber program. There was one elementary special ed teacher and one secondary special ed teacher. Due to the number of students that entered the cyber program, there's like over 1,100 at the elementary level, and I think 600 at our secondary level. We actually needed the equivalent of about 7 or 8 special education teachers in order to meet the needs of the cyber program. So many of our teachers that are teaching in the remote are also teaching in the cyber program. I share that with you so that it's a kind of a very delicate balance. If we have parents wanting to move from brick and mortar to remote or remote to brick and mortar, we need to make sure that we have the adequate staffing in each of those locations to meet the students' needs, okay? Actual start date for kindergarten classes for brick and mortar and cyber is on August 31st. Yes, that is correct. The ratio of aides to students in high school, please. That's varying as far as the needs are. I don't have the exact number. The students that are in the brick and mortar, if they have adult support in their IEPs, though the adult support will be provided as written into the IEPs. Okay, will they be signed to one-to-one? So when we look at the students' needs and how they're written into the IEPs, usually it is like personal care assistance, or adult support to be able to do certain activities. So we'll provide what is listed in those IEPs. Okay, we had to distribute about 230 paraprofessionals across the district. Certainly if we tried to maintain the paraprofessionals that worked with students previously, it's not always feasible. As I shared with you in the beginning, we did, give our staff the option of working brick and mortar versus remote. Not all staff members feel comfortable in that brick and mortar setting or may have health conditions for themselves or family members that makes them unable to be able to work in the brick and mortar setting at this time. So it's not necessarily the same staff will be in the classrooms as previous, but we did try to keep that as much as possible. If there's a positive case and one group is sent home, will they continue on a virtual schedule? If we can accomplish that, we will certainly try to do that as much as possible to move from that brick and mortar to the remote if it is a full class. If it's a situation where one student is out, ill, they could certainly Zoom in for certain sections of the day, and we'll work with you on that. Please be patient as I say that, because we're going to have to work through what that's going to look like. But as much as possible, we want students to be able to continue to access their education, even if they're unable to be in that brick and mortar setting for whatever reason. But we'll need to work through how that will occur. If there's a shutdown, does learning continue with 2.0 or does learning stop? Again, we'll do the best that we can, and we're going to have to look at the individual situation and determine how we can have students access their education. But our goal is that they continue whether they are in that brick and mortar or in that remote setting. Oh, great, excellent question. Will parents be contacted for physical forms or medical exam immunization requirements, or is that on hold? So for immunizations, they are on hold for 2 months. There is a period of time. So certainly that doesn't mean you have to wait for 2 months, but there is a grace period for 2 months. So if you're taking your child to a wellness visit, or you're getting immunizations, certainly go ahead and do that. And so that they're in place. But right now at the state level, there's immunizations. They did say, as far as like screenings and things like that, that it needs to happen this year, but they've given some leeway as to when that may happen. It does not have to be at the very beginning of the school year. Certainly you want to give updated medical information. As I shared, there will be a nurse that'll be in the building. They will have access to the students that, even if, so again, if you're at East Goshen, but you're an extant student, they will have access to the extant medical records, but you will need to update. That's a great question. You'll need to update those forms. Typically that's in the parent portal, but we'll get back to you on that one as well. Okay, let's see. Do I know anything about the before and after care program status? Okay, so ACP is operating in a number of, I believe in 7 of our elementary buildings. So you can contact Dr. Sarah Missett is responsible for the ACP program. There's probably also something on our website. and you can certainly look at them. I don't have the buildings memorized off the top of my head. I apologize. But they are in most of our buildings. So if you need before and after care, you can certainly reach out to find that information. Are special teachers brick and mortar? No, they are not. They are all remote. They will not be brick and mortar until we move to the hybrid model. For students who are virtual, will there be speech and OT services provided virtually for them? Yes. And as we talk, they will be virtual. And as we talk about phasing in, and Dr. Scanlon mentioned that a couple of times, one of the areas we will look at for students that are virtual is, can we start to provide some of those related services in the brick and mortar setting? I can share with you that it definitely would not happen prior to October 9th. The Chester County Health Department has stated that they believe all schools should be starting remotely until at least October 9th. And we look at the incidences of COVID, and there's a schedule that has been developed with that. But after that, we certainly are going to be looking at, are there students that we can bring in for more services, or more brick and mortar education, and certainly related services, one of the areas that we want to be able to consider. Are TSS allowed in the classroom? Another excellent question. So if you had a TSS before and they were coming into the classrooms, yes, they can. I would please make sure that you're notifying the special education teacher that you want that to continue, and or the special education supervisor. They will need to, follow all of our same protocols that I mentioned previously. But we are permitting them. If it is a brand new situation and you previously did not have a TSS with your child, I would please work with the special education supervisor to determine what types of services will be provided and how they will be provided. We want to make sure that we're working on the same page and that we're using the same language with our students and have the same goals, but certainly we will welcome them. For doctor's appointments, will we still leave early? Let the school know. Yes. Okay. Same thing. Like if your child's going to be absent, if they're sick, and they're not coming to school, you'll need to provide a parent note. I will state that for current purposes for this year, we are not having a limit on the number of parent notes. You're probably the first parent group to hear that live from me. But we don't want to unnecessarily send students to doctors, given what's happening right now. Doctors don't want to be inundated with patients that may not need to see them. And we don't want to put any other stress or concerns with parents needing to take children to doctors unnecessarily. We certainly will be following truancy if there is an area of concern, but there will not be a limit on parent notes at this time. But yes, please notify the building if your child is not going to be in school, or you need to leave early or come in late. I'm getting a question, who the specific speech teacher is going to be, and is Lily at Ruston?
Yes.
Right. Melissa, can you answer that?
Yeah, Lily, your speech teacher will be the same that it has been in the past over at Ruston.
Good question, Lee. Thank you. How would the in-person transition to hybrid person, would I still be 5 days a week? Okay, great. Yes, you would be 5 days a week. And when we move to hybrid, Dr. Scanlon has stated that parents that have chosen to keep their children in remote or start in remote may continue in remote. It may not look exactly the same, but they would be able to continue. Students that are in the brick and mortar setting that move to hybrid will continue to be educated in the brick and mortar 5 days a week. Oh, really good question about the ACP students and using the playgrounds. I am going to need to find that out. I don't know if they will be sharing the playground space. If playgrounds are shared, what we did in the pilot is we limited it like one class at a time going out to the playgrounds, and maybe, again, I'm thinking of East Goshen and there's going to be small numbers of students in classes. Maybe we'll have 2 classes out in the out there, but What we won't be doing is mixing ACP with our special education students during the day. So if there is a use of space like such as the playgrounds, they would need to be disinfected between the uses one way or the other. When can we expect to hear final numbers, details for a child-specific classroom? Total number of students, aides, and who the therapists are. They're working on those schedules right now. Staff have certainly all been assigned at this point. Teachers are working on those class lists. It may not be until next week that you'll have those definite numbers as far as the number in the classroom, but we will certainly get that. They're really working on the logistics of what the schedules will look like. Remember, teachers just started yesterday, and I can share with you that they are in 4 full days of professional development to work on, you know, for some of those teachers that are working in the remote environment, how to teach in that environment. If it's block scheduling, what does that look like? There's been a lot of professional development. Now, there are some times that they have to collaborate, but they are pretty booked. So I would appreciate if we could give them some latitude to next week to get some of that information. Okay, so if one child is in the class has COVID, do the other students get tested? That we were going to take the direction from the Chester County Health Department. They will do that contact tracing. They will make the recommendation as to who needs to get tested and who does not. Special teachers are not, because the special teachers like art, music, phys ed, regular education is starting in remote. So all regular ed teachers will be starting in remote, including those specials. They will not move to the brick and mortar until we move to the hybrid model. Has the amount of absences been increased based on the potential quarantine and COVID responses? As I shared, parent notes, you'll be able to use parent notes more beyond what was in our current administrative guidelines. So that increase, there is not a limit at this point. And certainly if you're being advised to quarantine, that's coming from the medical professionals, and that's not considered a parent note. Who will be in the classroom with the students? Will there be actual teachers? Oh, okay. So for the brick and mortar, there will be the special education teachers, the paraprofessionals, the related services, if there's behavior supports that are being provided, all of that will be provided in person in brick and mortar. The remote sections are based on the regular education portions of your child's day. That will all be remote, but they will be accessing that from the classroom. Are outside providers permitted on site, as some were in the summer? Outside providers like dog therapy, art therapy, and etc. I don't believe, unless I'm wrong, I don't believe we had dogs in the summer in our pilot program. We did have Center on Central come in to do some of the social skills and things along those lines. That typically does not take place during the school year. But if there are services or providers that we typically use during the school year, yes, they would be able to come into the buildings to be able to provide those services. Okay. You are welcome. I appreciate I'm able to answer those questions. So I will certainly, stay on it for a couple more minutes. And if there's any additional questions that we didn't get addressed, I can certainly answer them. I really do appreciate you, coming out tonight. There's 64 of us that are on here. And, I know some of our teachers hopped on because they wanted to hear what questions that you have and hear the information that's being shared with you so they can help, support you and your children coming into our buildings. We're very excited that, we were able to have the opportunity to be able to provide the program in the brick and mortar. Teachers are happy. I will share, teachers are back this week. Everyone was expected to come to their buildings for their professional development. So it's great to see, people in our buildings. Some of our teachers may even be choosing, if they're teaching remote, to teach from their classrooms. So it'll be, hopefully kids won't need to just see their teachers at home. Okay, will life skills classes be going on field trips? Not to start the year. We could certainly look at that as we progress and we look at the environments. We'll talk about what that looks like for at least for the first 4 or 5 weeks. That we will not have that take place. If we see that there are some less restrictions, we'll certainly monitor that. Okay, oops. Too fast. Can we pick up the children after PTOT sessions from school and attend the regular class sessions virtually from home? Can you? Yes. My preference for consistency for kids would be that they would participate for the full day. I think it's going to be challenging if you're going to be picking them up every day at a certain time. I think the majority of their special ed services, it may be better for them to stay in for the full day. Is it possible to pick them up? Yes, you can. Will IEPs be done before school? Before school starts next Monday? Not if you don't have one scheduled now. Will they be started like before or after school? You mean like before 9 o'clock or after 3 o'clock? Yes. It probably is going to be very difficult to hold IEP meetings during the time period that kids are being educated. I'm not saying it can't happen, but in the brick and mortar, it might be more challenging. What we will be doing is we will continue to be holding IEP meetings via Zoom for the time period until at least we come back to the hybrid setting. So that we'll be continuing in that regard. I hope that answered your question. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, if you did not get a menu for lunch, if you want to email me directly, I can send that out to you. It's a little hard for me. I can't see the emails on the chat. So if you email me, you can even do it tonight. I will certainly send that back out to you. Right now, students will be eating in the classroom for the most part, because in the buildings that they have ACP, the ACP is probably using the cafeteria. It is possible if the children are not in a building with ACP that they may be able to go to the cafeteria to eat. If they eat in the cafeteria, they do need to all be 6 feet apart from one another. They need to be facing the same direction. So those are some of the parameters. But for right now, we're starting with students eating in the classroom. Okay, so if you need, there's some support like with remote, with students being at home in different scenarios. For students that are in remote setting that have IEPs, and even as typical students that might be struggling, we have a system set up that we can provide. I'm not saying exactly what that will look like, but there may be some adult support to be able to work with students on an individual basis during the day to help them with that. We also contract with Aviana to provide some of our behavioral supports, and they worked over the summer with our staff in the brick and mortar setting, as well as with some of our families in the remote setting, and that they were able to provide some supports and some suggestions through their behavior supports that can help in the home as well. If your child has an IEP and is in remote and you have some questions about that support will look like, I would encourage you to reach out to the special ed teacher or supervisor to get some more specific information about your situation. Michelle Porco, oh good, somebody put it in, mporco@wcasd.net. And I think it was 1040, if I remember the extension correctly. And that would be 484-266-1040 or 484-266-1000.
Leanne?
Yes.
It's 10:45.
Oh, 10:45. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. 10:45. Thank you for the clarification. Whoever's at 10:40 might be getting some phone calls they didn't expect. All right, 10:45. Those are great. And again, we've been recording this session, so certainly you can come back and look at it again, or you can share it if your spouse or other members weren't able to attend. And for families that couldn't participate tonight, they can certainly come back and look at that. I don't see anything else coming up. I appreciate all your thanks for those of you that didn't see it. You know, we appreciate it tremendously. You know, in administration, it means a lot to us that you know you're happy that we're able to offer the brick and mortar. It helps us to know the work that we're putting in. It's well worth it. We know our kids, you know, are meeting with some success when they can be face to face with the staff, much more so than they can in the remote. So hopefully this is a good start to the year, and we'll see you soon. Take care.